So you've got Russia that's been accumulating gold. We know China is the biggest holder of gold worldwide. I mean, forget about the official statistics. The official numbers are a complete joke. If you look at the onshoring, importing of gold by China over the last 10, 15 years, they have a minimum 25,000 metric tons, and we have a very, I'm not sure what word I want to use here, we have a very suspect 8,300 tons. Do we really have that? There's not been an audit since 1956. It's highly doubtful. And I mean, just go back to the old saying, and it makes total sense. He who has the gold, read money. He who has the gold makes the rules. And unfortunately, I mean, I hate to see this because I mean, I'm an American, I'm pro-American, but we are failing. We are a failing empire. You'd have to be actually in the backroom discussions to know whether or not Israel acted on their own or not. My biggest concern is that Russia jumps into this, and understand that Iran is a major supplier of oil to China. And they've just signed a bunch of, over the last year, they've signed a whole bunch of trade deals guaranteeing them X amount of oil. Is that oil going to even be produced after the smoke clears? So, I mean, the danger is that Russia gets involved, China gets involved. You're talking about a world war. As of this morning, it's different. We've already had two tankers in the Strait of Hormuz that collided. You've got one that's on fire. I don't know the likelihood of it sinking, but obviously that would be an ecological disaster. But if you start plugging up the Strait of Hormuz and that's not able to be used, that's 20% of all the oil that's transported worldwide. So, I mean, that's, you're putting a crimp in supply right there. I mean, if this does go hot, it's already hot, but if the U.S. does join in, if Russia follows, if China follows, I've seen numbers of $130 oil. I think it's plausible you could see $300 oil, depending upon, what happens to the infrastructure of Iran producing oil. Does anything would anything flow through the Strait of Hormuz? Probably not. So you really can't put a number on where oil is going to go. But like I said, if we see this expand into a worldwide conflict, the price of oil is going to go stratospheric.
Rising tensions in the Middle East threaten to ignite a global energy crisis. The Strait of Hormuz, a critical passage for 20% of global oil shipments, now faces disruption after recent tanker incidents. If conflict escalates between Israel, Iran, and potential involvement from Russia or China, oil infrastructure may be destroyed, pushing prices to unimaginable highs. Experts warn of $300 per barrel scenarios.
Super high oil prices. I mean, now you're talking about inflation. I mean, that's inflationary. It's obviously a big tax on each individual that drives, because now they're spending more money to get from point A to point B. I think you got to look at it and just understand that if this expands, there are no good bullet points whatsoever. I would just say that the first casualty of war is truth. And I just posted last night, Tulsi Gabbard testifying in front of Congress, I think it was March 25th or whatever, that they did not have intelligence that Iran was close to a nuclear weapon or even trying to build nuclear weapons. So, who's telling the truth? Was she lying? Was she, ill-informed? I don't know, but I think it's pretty convenient to come out and say that, Iran's just a few days away from a nuclear weapon and Israel launches. there is a false flag somewhere. I mean, obviously, there's a chance that that doesn't happen, but I think it's extremely likely that it will happen, and I can almost guarantee you that the false flag will not be a carrier going down. Can you imagine what markets would do? Can you imagine what the dollar would do if it was shown that the U.S. is not the biggest, baddest bully on the block any longer?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Let me add to that. I mentioned the dollar. Let's look at treasuries. What happens to treasury auctions? Do you have the safe haven flight of capital coming to the U.S. or going somewhere else? And that somewhere else most likely would be gold and silver or other hard assets. I under the scenario of a carrier going down, the treasury market would be in total convulsions. The dollar would probably take, in a day, probably take a 5% hit. I don't see that scenario happening, but nothing's off the table.
As headlines spin conflicting stories, truth becomes the first casualty. Allegations of false flags and nuclear threats swirl as nations posture. Meanwhile, Russia, financially resilient with minimal debt, benefits from oil price surges. Western economies drowning in debt struggle to keep pace. If global trust in us power wanes, treasury markets could convulse and the dollar might suffer sharp declines, igniting panic.
I don't know how you're going to make Russia, lose income. This thing escalates, the price of oil is going to go higher, and that's their biggest. They produce oil. That's their biggest production asset. So, higher oil prices is going to actually add money to Russia. And I would remind people that Russia is probably the most solvent nation on the planet. They've only got 17% debt to GDP. The U.S. is 130% debt to GDP. Japan's over 300% debt to GDP. The West it's an insolvent bankruptcy waiting to happen. So I don't think from a financial standpoint, I don't see any way really that you're going to be able to hamstring Russia. And don't forget, they've been accumulating gold. Look at the gold chart from October of, I think it was 2022, and it was the day after the U.S. sequestered $300 billion of Russian reserves, of Russian U.S. Treasury reserves. Those were basically stolen. And from that day forward, that marked the absolute bottom for gold. So you've got Russia that's been accumulating gold. We know China is the biggest holder of gold worldwide. I mean, forget about the official statistics. The official numbers are a complete joke. If you look at the onshoring, importing of gold by China over the last 10, 15 years, they have a minimum 25,000 metric tons, and we have a very, I'm not sure what word I want to use here, we have a very suspect 8,300 tons. Do we really have that? There's not been an audit since 1956. It's highly doubtful. And I mean, just go back to the old saying, and it makes total sense. He who has the gold, read money. He who has the gold makes the rules. And unfortunately, I mean, I hate to see this because, I mean, I'm an American, I'm pro-American, but we are failing. We are a failing empire.
While Western citizens sell gold and silver to survive economic strain, central banks in Russia and China are amassing historic gold reserves. China may now hold over 25,000 metric tons, far beyond official reports. Since 2022, after the US froze Russian assets, gold's trajectory turned sharply upward. He who holds the gold makes the rules is no longer just a proverb, it's policy.
Why would Russia negotiate anything that's other than 100% in their favor? They've basically won. And they've bled the West. They've bled the West financially. More importantly, they bled the United States of munitions. I mean, the munitions we sent over the last couple of years to Ukraine, Has all of that been replaced? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I highly doubt it. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention: uh, few people, few people even remember this. But where is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for the United States? It was rock bottom uh, at the end of Biden's tenure back in January, and I haven't heard any reports. I mean, maybe it's happened, but I haven't seen it. But I've not read any reports at all that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has begun to be filled. Biggest positive is the border and the deportations. I mean, yeah, you've got a lot of people that argue that, but me personally, I think that's excellent. Uh, I I think the business dealings that he's done, like the crypto stuff that he did 2 days before the inauguration, uh, the now it's, what is it, Trump telephone, the he's going to run it through AT&T or whatever. I just think it's all a bad look. I also I questioned the first day I heard it about the anti-Semitism laws that they want to put into place, where if you say anything bad about Israel, you go to jail. Well, what about the First Amendment? I mean, the First Amendment is supposed to be ironclad law in the United States with no exceptions. And what are they doing here? Oh yeah, there's a First Amendment unless you talk about Israel badly. I think that's really bad. I also think that the timing of the Israeli attack a day or 2 days before the peace negotiations that were going to be held on Sunday. I mean, that is, it's not only a bad look. That's just plain bad. That's like somebody punching you in the head while they're shaking your hand at the same time. That's Pearl Harbor stuff.
With public debt unsustainable, some believe global powers are preparing to kick the table over. War, chaos, and crisis provide a convenient scapegoat for failed monetary policies. Instead of admitting systemic breakdown, leaders can blame conflict. As central banks hoard hard assets and retail investors sell theirs, a reset appears to be in motion where the wealthy prepare and the public pays.
I'll just give you a rough statistic. I think there's 30, it's just under that, it's in the high 20s, Republican senators / congressmen that are not members of AIPAC. I think the number is 60 or 70 Democrats that are not members of AIPAC. The rest, the vast majority, call it, it's over 300. 300 senators, representatives. I mean, they're funded by AIPAC. I think that tells you the whole story right there. The price of gold has gone higher from an institutional standpoint. You've got institutional buying, you've got hedge fund buying. Most importantly, you have central bank around the world buying. Oddly, and I mean, you couldn't have told me this scenario 2 years ago, 5, 10, 20 years ago, that the world would be on the verge of World War III and the public would be selling gold. They're selling gold, they're selling silver. And I've seen more sales in the last 6 to 9 months, just in my own personal book, in the last 9 months, I've seen more selling than I've seen collectively in the last 15 years. That tells me that there's no money on the streets. That tells me people, the average person, is running low on funds and selling assets. And of course, what asset are you going to sell? Something that doubled or something that's down in value? So you've seen gold, you've seen silver from a retail standpoint has been sold to raise capital, but from a central bank standpoint, they're unloading it left and right. Oh, and one other thing, Jesse, I want to mention that, and I started talking about this probably 10 years ago. It seems to me that I mean, obviously, paying the debt back is mathematically not possible. There's no way you can pay the debt back in current dollars. And I said all along that there would be a point in time where they would kick the table over. And they kick the table over because they know that they can't hold the system up any longer. So they start a war, some type of false flag, whatever. They kick the table over and they say, well, our policies were sound, our policies were working, except for this or that or whatever. And they'll have something to point at to blame rather than the structure of the system.